Welcome back. I'm Jeremy Thake. I'm here with Ina Arenas today.
Hello, everyone.
We're both from the Microsoft Graph team at Microsoft, and today we're going to talk to you a little bit about all the hype around Microsoft Graph that you've been hearing in Satya's keynote and in Rajesh's keynote and even in Scott's keynote today too.
All right, yes.
So we talked about Microsoft.
Getting a weird.
We talked about Microsoft 365 and the fact that you can build these tailored experience within that service. But how do you frame this to the world when you're talking about Microsoft Graph to people that are new to it?
Absolutely. So think about Microsoft 365 and the experiences that we offer as part of the suite. So we have Office 365, we have Windows 10, and we have the Enterprise Security and Mobility Suite. And these are products that we build at Microsoft to help people be creative and work together securely. But we build them in a very generic way, right? Like the same Office that you use for a school is the same Office that we use across industry verticals, like in legal or retail or marketing, and the same Office that will be used across small, medium businesses to Fortune 500 organizations. So it's a very generic experiences. And we rely on our partners to tailor those experiences and customize them to our customer needs. So for example, building specific solutions for a company around marketing or around a specific industry vertical. And that's where Microsoft Graph comes in and the Microsoft 365 platform.
Yeah. And so as we talk through it, like there's a whole notion of the platform as a whole and the different experience you can have, but it kind of starts with that identity layer.
Correct. It all starts with identity. That's where our user's identity is stored across work and consumer and school as well. And on top of the identity platform, it offers a set of variety of libraries that allow developers to authenticate users and access the resources that are available across Microsoft 365. We have the Microsoft Graph. So Microsoft Graph is that data fabric across all of the core resources that drive productivity for a user. So whether it is a mail that is sitting on your Outlook mailbox, or a calendar invitation, or a file in OneDrive, or a task in Planner, or even an alert in our security suite. All of these resources are part of the Microsoft Graph, and they feed and then they are available as a REST API for our developers. So I'll say like Microsoft Graph has 3 ways that developers can interact with it.
Yeah.
The first one is, as I just mentioned, a REST API, right, that allows you to basically, using HTTP requests, interact with all of the data that is part of Microsoft 365. The second one is powering a new set of class of applications, which is, we've seen a lot of customers trying to do large processing of the data that is in Microsoft Graph to derive insights out of that data. So we've built a no-code solution that allows you to move data from Microsoft Graph to Azure Data Fabric, and then you can use all of the Azure tooling, AI tooling, in order to analyze that data at large scale. We call that Data Connect, and that enables a set of insight applications. And the third way that you can interact with Microsoft Graph is by putting your data into the graph, whether it is annotating data resources that we already have in the graph, like adding additional properties to the users or the calendar or the mailboxes, or adding new set of entities to the graph. One of the ways that we are showing those in the Microsoft 365 experiences is allowing you to bring in files, for example, that will participate in search. So now when you see search result, you don't only see the files that are sitting in OneDrive and SharePoint, you will also see files that are in your own local storage.
Right, and one of those scenarios being kind of, it can be on-premises file services, but it could be, I'm using a SaaS provider and we don't want to migrate everything into OneDrive and SharePoint, but we'll connect to it through the graph and have that show up in that search experience.
Exactly. So those 3 ways. And then Microsoft Graph then allows you to build all of these different experiences, whether it is your own web applications or native or device applications or background processes that are processing all of this data, or extend experiences that we have in Microsoft 365, right? Like, so we have a lot of canvases in Microsoft 365, whether it is documents or conversations in Outlook or Teams, or the Windows timeline, or all of these different set of experiences that you can extend with data coming from the Microsoft Graph and building your custom experiences on top of it.
And one of the questions we get a lot is, like, what's the controls of the data and the privacy and the security of this? Like, well, hold on, like your app can get access to this stuff, but there are a lot of kind of controls we have in place. So do you want to explain a little bit about that
Absolutely.
aspect?
So I think that's an important point, which is the data in the Microsoft Graph is customers' data, right? Like this is not the Microsoft data. This is all belonging to a customer, whether it is an individual user or the organization. So users will consent to give applications access to that data. And administrators are always in full control to what data on their organization can be shared or not.
Right.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, this notion of the different stacks and the technology underneath, we accept in all comers of development, but kind of what kind of stories do you hear from developers that are trying to use the graph, like not maybe on our traditional platforms that we would expect at Microsoft?
So we have, like you're saying, we're embracing all type of applications, all type of developer technologies, and we're trying to provide a set of, like I'll say, a menu that developers can come and pick and choose that will help them build their experiences on top of the Microsoft 365 platform. And that menu is across many different layers. So for example, if you're building a web application, we have UI components that you can use for the React and for UWP. We have adaptive well with all the Microsoft Graph data and allow you to apps in Teams or in the timeline. And in addition to the UX, we have a set of case libraries that allow in very different languages, where you're building client-side applications or server-side applications in any language that you're comfortable with. We have a library for that. And then I'll say that depending on what type of application you're building, also the auth flows that you use will be different, right? Like so. This morning, we mentioned the general availability of the Microsoft authentication libraries for .NET and JavaScript. So we have authentication providers on our libraries that allow you to, depending on what type of application you're building, whether it is user interactive or non-interactive application, have different flows that allow the access to the data.
Yeah, we're demoing this week as an example the Teams, if you're building a bot, for instance. Historically, when you authenticated against the Graph APIs, there was this device code flow that had to happen. But with the new authentication cards that are provided by the bot framework, you're able to just essentially take on the identity of whoever's signed into Teams and call the graph without any kind of prompts for auth at all. So we've definitely made great steps to making this a more seamless experience across whatever surface or canvas that you're building inside of our Microsoft experiences. And also with those MCell libraries GAing, it's great to see that those are now going to be working for their own apps as well.
And then we have having these wide variety of services exposed through the API, which remember is one single endpoint, all of these different services in Microsoft 365, then allows you to use a wide variety of technologies on top of it, right? Like you can use cognitive services, you can use the bot framework, you can use ML and machine learning on top of the data that we have with Data Connect. So all of the different tools are able and then open up for you to use on top of this data to build your applications.
Right. And as on the screen at the moment, there's no real excuse to not be able to get started very quickly. If you go to graph.microsoft.com, we have a simple get started experience here for those platforms that we explained. And if you select the platform on this page, essentially we have a quick start within literally 2 minutes of you picking the language, and then actually goes and creates the application for you. You can have a zip file that you can download and run straight into Visual Studio, which is great. Like, it's a very good way to get going. But we hear from developers that sometimes that's cheating. You want to know under the covers what the steps were to get that to work. And so we have these tutorials that you can follow, which take 20 to 25 minutes, but it'll walk you through those same steps of creating that zip file project so you understand what's all the lining up of the MCell libraries that you're using to get the access token, and then how you're using the Microsoft Graph SDKs to then call the API to get that through. And then obviously we have this SDK, which we're readily updating this week, and there's some great authentication library benefits that we have this week that Daryl and I are going to talk about later in the week on one of these live shows. But the best place to get started is the Graph Explorer, and I love showing this from the perspective of you can do this right now in front of your laptop.
Everyone can do it.
On the left-hand side here, you'll see these simple examples like Get My Profile, which is going to show at the bottom here the response, the exact response you get from that RESTful API. But we can even go in and see more samples to give you a bit more of an exploration about what data is available for you to have access to on the Microsoft Graph. So for instance, if I went into the mail samples here, those will show up on the left-hand side. And I can even just kind of show the things like, show me all the mail that are important and marked in my mailbox. Maybe you've got a business process that wants to go fetch those and display those in an app you've got, or a daemon app where you're going to go do some processing on those things because they've been marked as important. Now, you can test this without signing in. This is using demo data from a tenant we have back in Redmond. But you can also sign in. So if you sign up to the Microsoft 365 developer program, which is free, you'll get your own tenant. And I'm going to borrow Yina's tenant here to sign in as the infamous Megan B. And you'll see, yeah, she's very famous this week. And you'll see now that we actually have that identity of Megan. And what you'll see is now that when I run kind of get my photo, I'm getting back the data directly from that tenant. So for instance, from Megan's account, I can even go in and start to send mail and click and send those into mailboxes and really test and see the data arriving and showing up in Outlook.com or showing up in OneDrive.com. So it's a great way to get started with Graph Explorer. But I think the most exciting thing we've seen, in my personal opinion this week, is the Toolkit.
Yep.
So I'm going to slide this over your way because you've got a really great demo just to highlight how easy it is to go build your own experiences using our new web components that we've shipped in a public preview today.
So yeah, what is the Microsoft Graph Toolkit? Let's first start
That's right.
there.
Yeah.
So if you are building any type of UI, you're on top of the web, you can use the Microsoft Graph Toolkit, which offers you a set of web components that you can use regardless of the framework that you're using. Whether you're using React or Knockout or whatever JavaScript framework that is that you're comfortable with, you can use the controls to interact with the data in the Microsoft Graph. And the great part about it is that with one line of code, it just like gives you the UI and gives you all of the interaction with the authentication library and with the Microsoft Graph library to get the data into your application. So here I have an application that has the controls that we are talking about. The first control is the login control. So just with mgt/login, I get this sign-in control right here into my application. If I sign in with Megan, who's our famous alter ego this week, you're going to see, let me just refresh again. You're going to see that the control signs in Megan, gives me her profile picture and the information about her, the name and the email address. Now, another one of the controls that you see right here is the tasks control, this one right here. So the task control will bring data from a Planner or will bring data from the To-Do. So I have Planner right here. If I go to my plans, I see that there is this demo toolkit task, and it's showing right here on my control. Now, the next control that I want to show is the agenda control. The agenda control, of course, goes against your calendar. And I can set up a few things here on the agenda control, like, for example, which date I wanted to start with, how many days I wanted to bring in, and whether or not I want to group the events by day or not. And there's some other set of parameters that you can pass to the control to customize it and even template it to your own, the way that you want it to render it on the page. So here we have the agenda control showing up. And as you can see, not only out of the box with just a few lines, it looks very beautiful because it's using the Office UI fabric, but I don't have to do anything else. And it's been connecting, doing all of the auth ands, it's connecting to the data, and it's rendering right here on my page.
Yeah, it's nice because we had a lot of feedback from developers that it's great to be able to get all this data into our apps, but we're not the best at styling it to make it look like a Microsoft 365 experience.
Right.
So now with these web components, it's a great way for you to quickly accelerate your development to be able to have that task list within your web app and then leverage the task list that we have inside of Planner and To-Do. The benefit there is you don't have to roll your own task list and your own data storage. And then when the user's on the go, if your application, whether it's an enterprise application or something you've got in the store, those tasks you create will show inside the To-Do app on their phone when on the go without being in the context of your application. And so you get the benefit of your tasks living wherever the user is working and in their flow already, which is awesome.
And these controls are, of course, open sourced. So if you'd like to see more controls or if you'd like to contribute, right here on GitHub, we have the toolkit, which is open for everyone to send their contributions. So I think we need to wrap up now.
Yeah, that's right.
I think we can tell one thing, if you want to remember, is graph.microsoft.com. You can type that into your browser, and it will take you to all of our experiences, so how you can get started, our documentation, API reference, and all the things that you need for developing against Microsoft Graph.
Excellent. Well, look, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Jeremy.
And thanks for everyone for watching, and we'll see you with some more Graph stories on Build Live later in the week.
Bye-bye.